Christopher Nolan made a film about a man who couldn't form new memories.
I guess I've already told you about my condition.
Oh, well, only every time I see you.
And 20 years later, the average human attention span dropped below that of a goldfish. Nolan made a film about a chaos agent who wins by breaking every rule that civilized society agreed on.
I have no short-term memory. Since my injury, I can't make new memories.
And 8 years later, that exact figure appeared in real politics across 3 continents. Christopher made a film about planting ideas so deep in people's minds.
Mr. Cobb has a job offer he would like to discuss with you.
They'd believe those ideas were their own. And 8 years after that, Cambridge Analytica harvested 87 million Facebook profiles doing exactly that. The question is not whether Christopher Nolan predicted the future, the question is how. Here's what most people get wrong about Christopher Nolan. The conversation is always about the spectacle. The rotating hallway in Inception, the IMAX sequences in The Dark Knight, the real atomic explosion in Oppenheimer, that Nolan achieved using magnesium powder, propane, and gasoline. No CGI at all. But fixating on how Christopher builds his films is like looking at a weather warning and commenting on the font. What Nolan has actually been doing across 25 years is running a one-man early warning system disguised as a blockbuster franchise. Christopher Nolan has been the only filmmaker in Hollywood consistently making films about what happens when systems of order collapse. Not war films, not disaster films, but films about the psychological and technological mechanisms of civilizational failure. And here's what makes this genuinely strange. Nolan doesn't own a smartphone. In a 2023 Wired interview, Christopher confirmed he doesn't use a mobile phone, communicates through his wife and producing partner Emma Thomas, has never had a social media account.
Does Christopher Nolan have social media?
I do not.
And shoots exclusively on photochemical film, not digital.
The highest quality imaging format ever devised, particularly IMAX film, large format film. But film shows you the world kind of the way your eye sees it. Is it ridiculous for me to give a serious answer? Well, you're doing that, but that's why I shoot film.
Give the people what they want.
The man warning us about technological overreach has deliberately removed himself from it. Christopher Nolan was born in London in 1970, studied English literature at Cambridge, not film, and shot his first feature. Following, in 1998, on a $6,000 budget, filming on weekends because that was all he could afford.
Same person twice. That was the most important rule. That was the one that I broke first.
Following already contains the DNA of everything Nolan would spend the next 25 years building. A man whose identity is unstable, who cannot trust his own perception of events. Christopher was 28. The obsession was already fully formed. Memento was released in October 2000 on a $9 million budget. The film follows Leonard Shelby, a man with anterograde amnesia, meaning Leonard cannot form any new long-term memories.
It's my memory.
Amnesia.
No. It's different from that.
Every 15 minutes, Leonard's mind resets. Leonard tattoos facts onto his own body just to remember what he's doing and why. To force the audience to feel what Leonard feels, Nolan told the story in reverse chronological order. Scenes shown backwards so the viewer is as disoriented as Leonard. You can't hold on to the thread. You have to keep going back. In 2000, when Memento came out, the average human attention span, measured by Microsoft Research, was 12 seconds. By 2015, that same study found it had dropped to 8.25 seconds. Humans now have shorter attention spans than a goldfish, which holds attention for 9 seconds. TikTok launched globally in 2016. By 2020, TikTok had 1.7 billion users spending an average of 95 minutes per day on the platform, watching videos between 15 and 60 seconds long. Now think about what Memento is actually describing. Leonard can't form new memories. Leonard can only respond to fragments, short-form prompts that tell him what to feel and what to do, but Leonard cannot connect them into a coherent narrative. Every 15 minutes, Leonard starts over, picking up context from the last note he left himself. That is the exact architecture of short-form content consumption in 2024. Context-free fragments. No narrative thread, emotional reactions to content the viewer has no background on, an endless scroll that resets the moment you put the phone down. I'm not saying Christopher Nolan invented social media brain rot in 2000. What I'm saying is that Nolan identified the psychological direction humanity was moving in, toward fragmented, non-linear cognition, 16 years before TikTok gave that direction a platform. Christopher didn't call it the attention crisis. Nolan called it anterograde amnesia, but Christopher was describing the same thing. The Dark Knight was released July 18th, 2018 on a $185 million budget and made $1,005 million at the global box office. The first superhero film in history to cross $1 billion. Heath Ledger won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his portrayal of the Joker. It was a posthumous win. Ledger died January 22nd, 2008, 6 months before release, at 28 from an accidental overdose of prescription medications. Christopher Nolan and his brother Jonathan wrote the screenplay in 2006 and 2007, 2 years before the financial crash of 2008, 8 years before Brexit, 8 years before the 2016 US election. Here is what The Dark Knight is actually about. The film is not about Batman. Batman is almost irrelevant. The film is about a new type of political actor, one who doesn't want money, doesn't want power, and doesn't have an ideology. The Joker's only goal is to prove that the rules holding civilization together are an illusion, that people abandon those rules the moment conditions get bad enough. The film's most chilling scene is the social experiment on the two ferries. Both boats have detonators. Both have been told to blow up the other, or be blown up. Nolan's argument is that ordinary people, given the option to commit violence against strangers to save themselves, will, in many cases, choose not to. But the Joker gets something right too. Christopher Nolan correctly predicted that the best person in the room, Harvey Dent, Gotham's hero, will break under pressure and become exactly what Dent fought against.
You think I want to escape from this? There is no escape from this.
In June 2016, 52% of British voters chose to leave the European Union in a referendum that virtually every major institution, economists, governments, business leaders, said was irrational. In November 2016, Donald Trump won the US presidential election, running explicitly against established political norms, mocking opponents, breaking conventions, saying out loud what politicians had always said only in private. In 2018, Jair Bolsonaro won Brazil. In 2022, Giorgia Meloni won Italy. These were not identical movements, but they shared one structural feature the Joker identified in 2008. The person who breaks the rules.
All you care about is money. This town deserves a better class of criminal. And I'm gonna give it to them.
Visibly, aggressively, without shame, gains credibility with people who believe the rules were never applied to them fairly. The Joker burns the money. Nolan wrote that character in 2006, a decade before those people started voting for chaos agents across 4 continents. Christopher didn't predict the specific politicians. Nolan predicted the psychological mechanism, the conditions under which a population abandons the rules. Christopher Nolan first had the idea for Inception when he was 16 years old and spent 10 years writing the screenplay, from 2000 to 2010. Warner Brothers greenlit it on a $160 million budget only after Nolan delivered The Dark Knight's billion-dollar performance. Inception grossed $836 million worldwide. The film's central mechanism: specialists enter people's dreams and plant ideas so deep in a target's subconscious that the target believes those ideas originated from their own mind. Robert Fisher, the target in the film, is led to believe his father's dying wish was for him to break up the empire Fisher was meant to inherit. Fisher does it freely, convinced it was his own decision. Fisher was never free. In March 2018, the New York Times and The Guardian simultaneously published investigations revealing Cambridge Analytica had harvested the personal data of 87 million Facebook users without their consent. Cambridge Analytica built psychological profiles of voters and delivered hyper-targeted messages designed to exploit each individual's specific fears, biases, and identity markers. The goal was not to inform. The goal was to plant ideas. Russian troll farms operating from St. Petersburg's Internet Research Agency ran 3,814 Facebook accounts and 170 Instagram accounts between 2013 and 2017, generating content to inflame divisions on both sides of the American political debate. Social scientists now call this technique narrative capture, embedding a belief so naturally into someone's information environment that the person cannot identify the moment it entered their mind. They just believe it, as if they always had. Nolan called it Inception. Christopher wrote that screenplay over 10 years starting in 2000. Cobb says it in the film, "What is the most resilient parasite? An idea."
A virus? An intestinal worm?
What Mr. Cobb is trying to say.
An idea. Resilient, highly contagious.
Oppenheimer was released July 21st, 2023 on a $100 million budget and grossed $952 million worldwide, the highest grossing biographical film in cinema history.
This is a matter of life and death.
Christopher Nolan spent 5 years developing it from the 2005 Pulitzer Prize-winning biography American Prometheus by Kai Bird and Martin Sherwin, a book those two historians took 25 years to research and write. The film's central question is not should the bomb have been built. That's what most people think Nolan is asking. What Christopher is actually asking is this: what happens to the man who builds a tool so powerful that the moment he hands it to authority, he loses all control over how it's used? J. Robert Oppenheimer directed The Manhattan Project, assembling the greatest concentration of scientific talent in human history at Los Alamos, New Mexico. Oppenheimer watched the Trinity test on July 16, 1945, the first nuclear detonation in history, and recalled the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
3 weeks later, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th, 1945. Oppenheimer had no input into that decision. Oppenheimer was not consulted on the targets. Oppenheimer built the weapon. Oppenheimer was not permitted to decide how it was used. In May 2023, the same month, Christopher Nolan released the first Oppenheimer trailer. Geoffrey Hinton, known as the godfather of artificial intelligence, resigned from Google. Hinton told the New York Times that Hinton left specifically to speak freely about AI's dangers and expressed regret for his life's work. The man who helped build the technology every major AI system runs on said he was afraid of what would happen when that tool reached corporations and governments. Hinton built the weapon. Hinton cannot decide how it's used. 1 month later, in June 2023, Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, testified before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee that AI could cause significant harm to the world and asked Congress to regulate it. The man running the most powerful AI company in the world testified asking regulators to stop him. Oppenheimer did the same in 1945 and was rewarded by having his security clearance revoked in 1954, accused of communist sympathies, and stripped of political influence permanently. Christopher Nolan had been developing Oppenheimer since 2018, before Hinton resigned, before Altman testified, before ChatGPT launched in November 2020. 2. Nolan didn't make an AI film. Christopher made a film about the specific psychological experience of being the creator who cannot control the creation, and released it at the exact moment the actual creators of the most powerful technology in human history were publicly saying the same thing. Let me be direct about what I believe is happening here. Christopher Nolan is not psychic. Nolan is not getting information from anywhere unusual. What Christopher is doing is something much rarer, reading the direction of human systems, cognitive, political, social, technological, and following those directions to their logical conclusions. Not where they are going. Memento looked at human cognition in the age of information overload and asked what happens to identity when the ability to form continuous narrative breaks down. The Dark Knight looked at the social contract in an era of institutional failure and asked what a political actor looks like who understands the contract is an illusion. Inception looked at the architecture of belief formation in an age of media saturation and asked what happens when the tool for planting ideas becomes invisible. Oppenheimer looked at scientists handing catastrophic tools to governments and asked what is the psychological cost of building something you can no longer stop. These are not separate films, these are 4 chapters of the same argument. And here is the detail that stays with me. Nolan shoots on film, not digital. Christopher has no smartphone, no social media, no digital footprint I can find. The man who has spent 25 years warning about fragmented cognition, manipulated belief, and uncontrollable creation has structured his own life to be outside the influence of those exact technologies. That is either extreme consistency or the most coherent long-term artistic position I've seen from anyone working in mainstream cinema. Christopher Nolan's films have grossed a combined $6.1 billion worldwide across 12 features. That number means across 25 years, millions of people repeatedly paid to sit in a dark room and let Christopher show them what he sees. Most left thinking they'd watched a great thriller. What they actually experienced was a 25-year series of warnings about the specific ways human civilization tends to come apart. Nolan's next film, The Odyssey, is in pre-production at Universal Pictures with a reported budget north of $250 million, beginning principal photography in 2025. The Odyssey is the story of a man who cannot get home, who travels through a world that keeps transforming while his kingdom falls apart without him. A man who has to disguise his identity to survive, who returns to find his home occupied by forces that assumed he would never come back. If Christopher Nolan's pattern holds, if The Odyssey is another 10-year prediction in disguise, then the question worth sitting with is this. What does it mean that the story Nolan chose to tell right now is about a man who has been gone so long that the people running the world have forgotten he ever existed? What is Christopher seeing? What is Nolan warning us about this time? I don't know the answer yet, but based on the last 25 years, I think we should pay attention. If you want to see more of my content, hit that subscribe button and I will see you in the next video. Peace.